There's one thing I wanted to ask. This is not a perfect segue. It's almost the opposite, actually. But there was an interesting story I wanted to ask you about. I believe you had a partner, a boyfriend at some time, who you said was like a reptilian or a shapeshifter or a dark sort of entity. Could you talk about that? What? I don't even know how to ask the question. Did you see that he had reptilian features, or how did you come to know who this person was?
Totally. Yeah. So it was quite a process to like figure out what was going on. It's just so bizarre. So we were together for about a year, and just I can't describe enough how deep and even subtle the manipulation, the gaslighting, the making me question who I am and what I could do, and like just it was like the whole mission of that person in my life was to completely derail me from what I knew to be true, which is, the truth of the universe, basically.
Mm.
And it was done in such a subtle way that I didn't really recognize how controlled I was being, how manipulated I was being, until pretty much the very end. And it was, I'm just going to say it. There was also like a lot of kind of blood and sex rituals that I didn't realize he was into until, once again, also the very end. It was at a point where it kind of felt like he wanted to consume not just my energy, but also my body. So like one of the weird things was like, so TMI, but like he would like lick my armpits or pull an eyebrow hair and eat the skin on the end of it, like literally like consuming my body, and like many other things that I'm not going to talk about. But yeah, it was so fascinating. So I went through that, and then right at the end, I'm like, what's happening? Like, what's going on? Like, I don't know. Like, I was starting to question things. I was starting to kind of break away from the illusion that was created. And man, it was crazy. Like, I started having all of these like, what are they called? Screen dreams or screen memories, right? Like, so like not only like manipulating my forward facing, my, 3D reality, but also manipulating downloads, manipulating dream time, manipulating memories. Like just, it was a full invasion of my entire reality. I didn't realize until literally even years after how deep it went. And then when I started to kind of question, I hit up as many psychics as I could. The reason why is because I lost part of my psychic ability, I think because he was consuming that energy from me, and I couldn't channel for myself. I couldn't get a clear channel. And so I went to like, pretty much I hit up like every psychic I possibly could. And it wasn't until I went to one psychic and she did some card pulling, and I don't know, like I'm still pretty skeptical about like pulling cards or whatever, as far as like tarot reading, I don't know, whatever. And so she was pulling cards, and the first card that she pulled was, because I said I'm having relationship issues. The first card that she pulled was the devil card. And she pulled the devil card and she looked at me and she said, "This isn't good." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She's like, "Your partner," she didn't really say deals with the devil, but she says your partner has an entity that's been attached to him. And I said, yeah, whatever. Okay. Like you're totally, this is bullshit. And after that, I started to really think about it. And then it wasn't too long after where I was having a party at my place. I think it was like a Halloween party. And I was like in university at the time. And it was just this weird moment where like he was very like possessive, like very attached, very controlling, very possessive. And so I was like standing on this chair getting this like punch bowl down from like one of the top shelves of the kitchen, and he came over to like help me down, and he looked at me and he said something to the effect of like, "You're my woman, right?" Like it was like kind of like a controlling statement. And as he said that, his like piercing blue eyes shapeshifted into a slit, like his pupils like completely moved into these like reptilian like slit whatever eyes, and the blue went away. And I was just frozen. I'm like, what the hell is that? And so the whole night I was like super standoffish, and he kept saying, what did you see? What did you see? Because I see things, right? And I'm like, oh, it was a ghost. It was just a ghost that popped into the room, right? I just like literally could not tell him that I freaking saw his true self. And it was quite a process to get to remove myself from that entity, that reptilian that was inhabiting the body. I later found out that the reptilian entity, it was basically like, I don't know how else to say it, but I guess he was in a bloodline that was able to allow this being into his physical body, and that it was laying dormant on his back for pretty much his whole life. But when he met me, it started to actually started to actually like take control over his body. So it wasn't in him the whole time. And that's kind of what happened. And what's really interesting is he always had back issues. Whatever it was just like tons and tons of like aches and pains in the back ever since he was young, which is when this thing got attached to him. And then when it met me, you know, it started to step into his body and kind of take full control. And so, yeah, so it was, you know, like they really do put a spell over you, you know. It's pretty wild. And one of the things that I've discovered is one of their last tactics to get to you is through the heart, because that's kind of a very open, vulnerable way. So I've actually noticed and had a lot of sessions with tons of star seeds, like, you know, old soul, whatever, like higher vibrational beings in human bodies that have all experienced reptilian shapeshifters in their life, because they're trying to basically hook them in and take them down before they make a change in the world. And I have numerous stories about, unfortunately, these reptilian shapeshifters getting these star seeds into like meth, like just like really messed up things to like totally derail them off of their path.
Wow.
So luckily there was obviously like no drugs involved, but it was the deep amount of manipulation that took place really scarred me, probably for life, but also gave me so many experiences that I would never change or take back, because I learned so much from that. And I also re-experienced tons of past lives that were linked in with that experience as well.
That's super intense. And I appreciate you being open about that. And, you know, I guess, you know, I was talking with another podcaster recently, and she was like, I still can't figure out if reptilians are real physically here on Earth, or if they're like coming in energetically and using humans' bodies. Can you add any clarity to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's both for sure. I think the majority is the possession, right? Like you could literally just call it possession. The reptilian entity, soul, whatever you want to call it, comes into the human body. Now, because of what reptilians can do and are capable of, and the fact that they've already messed with our DNA, and like some human beings have more of the reptilian DNA in them than other human beings, they can actually completely intermingle or entangle with that human's DNA to have certain things like the shape-shifting eye, or what have you. So there are physical effects to a possession like that if the DNA of the human has a higher than normal reptilian DNA. So that's kind of what I know about the possession. But then there are actual physical, real reptilian giant, I call them dinosaur beings, because that's what they look like. They look like literally humanoid T-Rexes with, sometimes they even have tails, green scaly skin, like really scary looking beings. But I do want to say too that not all reptilians are bad. Like it's the same thing. Like just because we have a couple bad eggs in humanity doesn't mean that the whole thing is just like really bad. But yeah, I mean, the majority of reptilians are not great. And so there are actual physical reptilian beings here on planet Earth. The majority of them actually live underground in caves and caverns. So when I started to do a lot of remote viewing and I went to a lot of military bases, I started to kind of wind up or like end up in these dark reptilian infested caves. I'm like, where am I right now? There's just some pretty wild experiences there. And then I do believe that instead of like, okay, when we think about like politicians or celebrities, right, like the people, the shadow government, whatever, the elites who kind of rule the world, in that whole kind of category, some of them are full possessions. And in order to allow the possession to take place, there are blood and sex rituals that need to happen in order to allow that possession to take place. So there are contracts signed. So for the top politicians and celebrities and whatever, who I believe are really, and it's really sad to say, they're puppets, right, for these beings, they are fully consciously aware of literally signing their soul away for fame and money and whatever, and fortune. What they don't realize, and even though they're told that most of the time, what they don't realize is that they're not going to be like they're literally not going to be in control of the body. So that's going to be, or they're only in control of the body when it doesn't really matter, you know. So there's a lot of and so then when you think about the shadow governments, there are physical reptilians who will shapeshift into human bodies, and they're able to do that, and that's changing the molecular DNA or the molecular structure of their biology. And then they also have technology that actually shifts their form into kind of like a holographic state. So there are celebrities who have been seen as giant 10 foot tall, you know, reptile looking beings, and that's been witnessed and observed by many different beings. And actually back in 2012, when I was really exploring reptilians and their involvement and all of that through channeling, not through reading or anything, I had this download that one of the main disclosures on planet Earth was going to be a celebrity who, or a musician, I guess, on stage in front of thousands of people, and not only thousands of people, but live streaming on all of these thousands of people's phones. And they're going to accidentally, because they do under stress, shapeshift into this reptilian being, and it's going to be the biggest disclosure, you know, that humanity could ever have. And so I channeled that many years ago. Now, of course, predictions are difficult because, especially when it comes down to the collective, we're hopping into an infinite number of timelines in every moment at a collective level. So that has not happened yet, but I think if it were to ever happen, it would really bring massive amounts of disclosure to humanity. And it would also, unfortunately, bring a lot of fear to humanity. And what the Galactic Federation wants to do is to minimize the amount of fear that we feel upon moving into the transition. Because if we all think that the only extraterrestrial life out there, even though reptilians aren't really extraterrestrial, are bad and evil and been controlling us, then how can we accept the Galactic Federation for being good? You know, like it's going to be really difficult to kind of spin that, like, oh, but there's another side too, you know. So it's kind of it's a lot of strategy that's going on up there with these Galactic Federation ships and the different timelines of disclosure.
Yeah, and you mentioned the law of non-intervention, and I know that the GFL's hands are somewhat tied because the reptilians are just going to come and do whatever they want, but the GFL has their own what is it in Star Trek, the prime objective, prime directive, like yeah. So yeah, what is the strategy to sort of bring, besides having Elizabeth April just tell everyone, what's their strategy for like letting everyone know there's good ETs?
There's a lot of things up in the air. Every once in a while, I'll get kind of like pissed as a human, and I'll just like go, like, it's so funny. It's like, if you could imagine me like storming up there as a human being, like, hello, this is not okay, and why are you intervening, and like, what, like, come on, like, and I always laugh at myself because I'm like, that's such a human trait, because like, honestly, like, I trust and I know that they've got it on lockdown and they've already thought about all the things, and they always come back with a really calm and collected answer for me when I'm in an emotional or reactive state. And I'm glad that I have those kind of emotions, because that is my human. And I think a lot of humans feel this way of like, so you've got med beds and you've got solutions and you've got a bunch of shit going on up there, and you're not giving us any of it, you know, stuff. Like, what? Yeah, give us the good stuff. Exactly. So yeah, so it's a really, really, really fine line. I guess what I could say about their strategy around disclosure, I just had a conversation with them maybe a month ago about what's the next big step. I remember that I asked them, I said, come on, like what would really happen if you just landed on the White House tomorrow? Like I literally asked that a month ago. I'm like, come on, what's the worst that could happen, right? And they literally I love when they do this because they have access to this information. So they gave me the timeline of one of their giant Galactic Federation ships literally landing on the White House lawn. And, you know, it's just such a public place. So there's people there. And then immediately the freaking military gets called. And it's this whole big thing. And the news stations are immediately saying they're attacking us. And they're like, it's all of a sudden completely skewed. And then military action. And it just like shit goes down. Like it was not good. It wasn't good. And, you know, they said that basically our planet is still being so controlled in a mass media sense, in a propaganda sense, but also because if you're not actually there, you don't know what's going on, right? But also in a militant sense, you know, we're being so controlled by the fight or flight mentality that it wouldn't be helpful. As a matter of fact, it would take us back many, many years of the progression that we have had if they just come right out and disclose. Really, really fun point. So I'm writing this book that's called Interviews with Interdimensionals, and it really is just interviews with the Galactic Federation and the different beings. And I asked one of these beings in a council, and I forget what council they were a part of, like the Security Council or something. So they stop major events. Like they're all about the Prime Directive. They're all about the law of non-intervention. So one of the things that I asked them is, has any species within the Galactic Federation ever gone rogue? Have they ever just said, fuck this, I'm just going to do my own thing? And they said, yes. And they said, are you familiar with the Phoenix Lights? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I don't think I was around at that time, but like, yeah, like it was a huge thing. And like all these like lights like came through, I guess, Arizona, and it was a huge amount of disclosure. And they said, that was done by the beings, the Yael is what they're called. They're like I've interacted with them. They're really beautiful. They're like shorter, 4 to 5 feet tall, looking very humanoid, almost looking like children actually, but just really an incredibly beautiful, angelic almost presence and energy to them. And a lot of the Yael actually live on planet Earth in like bases, but they're in like mountains. So like Mount Shasta, for example, has a base where a lot of the Yael live. And so anyway, so apparently the Yael back then were like, you know, they brought it up to the Galactic Federation many times in these meetings. What if we just give them disclosure? Like they'll have to wake up. They have to start questioning. They have to start progressing their consciousness. And the Galactic Federation said, nope, it's not time. They're not ready. They're not asking for it. They're not consciously aware, whatever. And so the Yael said, all right, cool. And on the back end, they got all of these ships, the Yael ships, and they're like, we're just going to create our own disclosure. So they started flying their ships over Arizona, and it was the Phoenix Lights. And that was apparently not supposed to happen in humanity's contracts. That went against the law of non-intervention, and it totally went against what the Galactic Federation agreed to and did not agree to, which I think is really funny. So then I had to ask them, what was the consequence? I'm curious, what are you going to do? Like put them in jail? Are you going to kick them off? Like what's going to happen? And they said, like, we thought long and hard about what the consequence would be for the Yael. And they said, we decided to keep them involved with the Galactic Federation because they are of a really high vibrational, and they did it not out of malice intent, but out of a progression intent. And they said, we decided that they no longer have a vote in meetings for a certain period of time. They just don't have a vote in things. But that was the consequence for that situation anyway. So that's kind of a good example of, you know, disclosure that wasn't supposed to happen, that did happen. So there are many different timelines as far as how disclosure can happen. What I keep hearing from the Galactic Federation these days is disclosure is taking place. It is happening, but it's happening more at an individual level. So if you want disclosure to happen, if you want to know what's going on, you have to ask for it at an individual level, and it will happen. Maybe it's an article you read, maybe it's a dream that you have, maybe it's a ship in the sky, but we need to realize that disclosure is not going to happen in the sense of Oh, there's something weird in the sky that I can't explain. Disclosure is happening at a much more deep, much more complex level that is really shifting our DNA rather than just looking into the sky every night.
Hey friend, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this particular clip, then I have something else I want to tell you about, which is the League of Superconductors. It's a business mastermind that I run to elevate the greatest change makers of our time. That is people that I like to call quantum entrepreneurs, metaphysical, spiritual teachers, healers, coaches, light workers of different types. And this is a year-long business mastermind starting in May of 2022. So if that's the type of thing that you're looking for, if you're looking to better fuel your mission by having a business that brings in all the abundance you're looking for, that both operates at the 3D level, serving the people of Earth, and at a multi-dimensional level, bringing in all of the higher wisdom and experience that you have access to. That's what we're doing. So if that sounds like something for you, then you can check out the link below, read a little bit more about the program, what we do each month. And I also invite you to apply for a call with me, a strategy session. We can get to know each other. I'll coach you a little bit, and you can decide if that might be the exact thing that you've been looking for. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.